This means thinking about our motives. What motivates you to want to be a social worker? What motivates you to want to get this particular hairstyle? What motivates you to want to listen to this kind of music? What motivates you to want to, like, vote for this person? What motivates you to behave aggressively? What motivates you to behave altruistically? And then really think about the causes of our behavior. Again, I'm sure we've all have done things that maybe have surprised ourselves, right? Or am I by myself in that regard?
You're right. You're not by yourself.
So it's, so hopefully after we've had those episodes, we've taken a step back, like, hey, why did I do that? Why was I so, angry? Or why did I lash out this way? Or, damn, I was, or it could be, man, something really bad happened and I was really calm. Like something where, like I almost like, so somebody was like many years ago, Maisha, was like somebody was trying to shoot me. And while it was happening, like I was really calm. Like I wasn't freaking out or panicking. But like later I was like, damn, like why was you so calm during like that episode? Why do these episodes make you so nervous and fidgety? Again, these are really important questions for us to ask ourselves. But keep in mind when we talk about the self, Maisha, it is three components to it. There are three parts to ourself. Jakira, these are concepts, even though the final exam won't be cumulative, as I talked about the information, it ties over from like chapter to chapter. So this is information that we're going to talk about throughout the rest of the course. So please make sure that you follow me here. And as always, if there are things that are not as clear, stop me, slow me down, ask me to repeat it. But it's really important that you understand these components. And we're going to, like I said, we're going to go over many times. So when we talk about the ABCs of self, one moment here. When we talk about the ABCs of self, there are three parts to it. The affect, behavior, and cognition. One of them again, so behavior, that's pretty easy to see. Cognition, when you hear that word, what comes to mind? When you hear that word cognition, what does that mean, usually?
Like your thinking process, how you thought about it.
Excellent. And then affect, Maisha, just speaks to your emotional response. Again, we can be affected in three ways. There have been times, for hell, probably sometimes dealing with me, where y'all may have been pissed off, but it don't show in your face. Other times, I'm sure there have been times where, like, yeah, where you have actually probably been in a good mood, and people will see your expression, your body language, like, man, Jakir, what's wrong? Did I do something? Like, no, I'm just really tired. Like, you didn't do nothing. So again, it's like I'm a people watcher, Maisha. So like just in general, like, if like I'm, I'll sit in a park, or if I'm at the club and stuff, before like I start getting it in, like I just like to watch and observe people, observe human beings. So like yesterday I was like watching a press conference. The press secretary for the new president, Jakira, she got asked a question, so she was like, doing this press conference, and she got asked a question, which I could tell pissed her off. But everybody in the country everybody in the world is watching her expression, and her expressions are not just for her. She's representing somebody else. So she had to put that poker face on real quick. But inside her thinking, she's probably in her mind like, this motherfucker, like, let this motherfucker ask one more stupid ass question. But outwardly, she's like, oh, that's a really thoughtful, interesting question. We've all done that before, right? It don't necessarily mean that you're being phony or fake. There are times where maybe it's okay for you to wear your emotions on your sleeve. There are other times where you probably should not. Y'all hear me? And we all become mindful of it. Again, we learned this early on. Your mama is saying something to you that you don't like, Maisha. It's getting on your nerves. You better mind that body language, young lady. Keep that to yourself. Slamming the door, something like that again. Like, so think about these things again in your personalized detail. Affect deals with your emotions. Behavior, what you actually do. and cognition, your thinking. A lot of times, Shakira, all those things are aligned. That I think that it's important to vote. So I actually voted. And then the results of the election, because I think it's important, the results of the election would have an emotional effect on me. There are some people who think that it's a good idea to vote, but don't actually vote. And who wins the election may not have any effect on them at all. Are there any questions so far or comments? Again, when you see something in italics, study it closely and prepare for the quiz and midterm exam. As always, this lecture is being recorded and will be posted, so I highly recommend that you go back and look at some of this stuff. And look, Jakira, don't wait to start looking at the lectures the day before the midterm. That's not going to be as helpful. As always, make sure that you're keeping up the reading. The author's going to explain this stuff a lot better than I can, I promise you. Take notes on what you read, so that if you have any questions about anything, you can bring notes to the lecture. I'll let you get this down very quickly, and then I'll break these terms down in more detail. As always, Shakira, make sure you see how this slide is connected to the previous slide when we talked about the three components of the self. But within that, we have a self-concept and self-schemas. I'll explain these in a bit more detail in a moment. Right there, that was a good example. I got an annoying text that, again, the emotion, there was annoyance, and it caused me to sigh and, put my hand in my head. Most of these things, again, are involuntary. But again, make note of these things in the world that we observe. And we don't observe anything more than we observe ourselves. So Maisha, self-concept. So let me ask you all this. Actually hold off on that. I'm gonna ask y'all to do this in a moment. But when we talk about the self-concept, right? None of us are just one thing. So yeah, I guess I will ask you all this. So for you all, in describing yourself, say for example, you're trying to catfish somebody on Facebook or something, Jakira, and they ask you hey, describe yourself. What are some things that you might say in describing yourself?
Outgoing, talkative, attractive, of course.
Good.
High standards,
I didn't hear the last one.
Oh, high standards.
Good.
Goofy.
Good.
I like to eat.
Good. I can tell.
Yeah.
But you weighing about 65 pounds and all.
Yeah.
It's always how it be. My girl is a super skinny who can eat the house down. It's amazing, but that's neither here nor there. What anything else?
Goal oriented.
Good.
Can be a little ratchet, fun times.
Say it again.
Could be a little. A little ratchet, like, like to have fun.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Or
Good.
Miami, stuff like that.
Good. Excellent. 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 So what this speaks to, right, that all the different attributes that make us who we are, that be careful, right? Because sometimes now let me ask you this, Shakira. Does everybody get to see all those sides of you?
No. No.
Right. Again, even though we're closely becoming best friends, I don't know you terribly well, but my sense is it's probably only a handful of people that get to see all of that. That's usually how it works. But be mindful, because it's probably have been people that have tried to size you up and explain to you, Jakira, who you are, and they only see one side of you. It's very annoying.
Very, very annoying. Yes.
Because we're so many different things, and every human being has experienced this. So keep this in mind as we go forward. Now, self-schemas, these are beliefs that we hold about ourselves that kind of guide our processes of self-relevant information. So again, our self-concept consists of many different self-schemas. So being a woman going into certain social environments is going to impact how you process stuff. Being Black is going to impact, being from Miami. You use it, like, again, you used that word before, Jakira, normal. Nothing wrong with that word at all. There are some social norms. Norms, again, are repeated patterns of behavior. And it is not no pattern of behavior in America for people, grown folks, to be walking around like dogs. Now, keep in mind, we're going to talk about the different stages of development later on, Maisha. So if I told you this person was like 6 years old, I might be like, okay, cool. But 48, like, again, you meet some dude on social media and he tells you, sometimes I like to dress up like as a dog for fun. That might end the conversation. So self-schemas, again, again, there's some information that may not be as important to how we process things. Our gender, our age, our educational background, our religious background, those things have a huge impact, and we'll talk about these in a bit more detail in a moment. So people again, right, who belong to multiple cultures, they may have a different self-schema for each culture. So in Miami, for example, where you have a lot of Cuban Americans, where the children of immigrants, they still feel sometimes, obviously, so their parents' traditions, but also they're very Americanized. Same with many of the Haitian Americans and stuff down there, just, any immigrant family, where again, you may, see things through the traditional Cuban eyes, but also American culture, which is, different in a lot of ways. Keep this in mind as we go forward, because again, even though we're all, African American, that can mean a lot of different things. So one of the things we're going to talk about here, and please make sure if you've not done this already, that you go back and read this material. I'm going to go through this pretty swiftly under the assumption that you have read it already. You surely were supposed to before class. That one of the things that helps us understand the self a lot better today in 2021, Maisha, is the use of science. So one of the things that we can see in terms of understanding psychology is that we can actually study the brain. Like I think I talked about this in this class before, how your brain, we can study it reacting like when you get sugar. Like it causes a chemical reaction. Like, again, we know, not guess, we know that sugar is very addictive, that human beings are wired to really like sugar. Not Black people, not brown people, not all human beings. It's almost like if you look at the effects of a brain, like cocaine or something like that, it's literally close to that. It's almost like you get a high from sugar. Do your own research. I could be making this up, but y'all probably have felt this enough times yourselves, right? No matter what your palate may be. But whether we're talking about sugar, whether we're talking about prejudice, whether we're talking about fear, whether we're talking about, excitement, there are different things that we can study about the brain itself that allows us to understand things about human behavior. And through that, one of the things that we see, for example, so your earlier point, Jakira McLeod, about you wondered about what happened with Boomer, the dog, when he was younger. and it's pointed here by Hood, that the self is an illusion that emerges from childhood social interactions. No wrong answers here, but what do you think that Hood is saying here? That ourselves, it emerges through our childhood social interactions. What is he saying here? How would you explain that? Again, no wrong answers, but work with it.
The situation that like we experienced as a child, like you may, like Jakir said, he maybe have got bitten by a dog or was obsessed with dogs. That from his childhood developed into adulthood of how he viewed himself as a dog.
Good. Do you think that any other aspects of childhood interactions could affect this? Not just with Boomer, but all of us.
Yeah, maybe like, can y'all hear me? My AirPods been acting funny.
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay, maybe if you were exposed to different behaviors or different things that you probably watched your parents do, your siblings, cousins, or whatever. Like, this may be a deeper, but like how his cousins play mom and dad. I mean, black people don't like to talk about it, but it's crazy how they'll play mom and dad, and then they pick up on these things like, okay, well, you're supposed to do this as the mom, and probably sexual things begin to happen. But then as you get older, now you're wondering, why are you so horny, or why are you so sexually involved and stuff like that, because you was exposed to it. So it kind of like repeats itself, or it comes back a little bit stronger in the adulthood. So it's how you view life. So now you're just going around having sex with women because you were already exposed to it. Hopefully that was something.
Absolutely. Great examples. Now, one of the things we want to be mindful about, like when you talk about like sexual urges in particular, is a really important one. That absolutely our environment plays a big role, but like in many ways, like Feinberg and Keenan's point will kind of speak to this that I'll allude to in a moment, that also keep in mind that even like as much as the environment matters, there's still a lot of chemical things going on in our brain. So again, do your own research on this. Don't do too much, but you know what I'm saying. Right? At certain ages, everybody gets really, really, really horny.
Mm-hmm.
Like not just American children, not people that was just raised in promiscuous homes, not just people that was raised in this type of culture. Everybody gets like, your hormones start to kick in and you're like, what the hell?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't want to be too graphic with y'all, but we having an adult conversation. Like the first time I had a wet dream, I was like, what the hell is going on? Like, what, huh? But like, again, I didn't have any control over that at all. My body started talking to me. Like, hey, dog, I don't know what's going on. So now what can be determinative, Jakira, is the environment that you grow in can impact how you express that. So if you grew up in an environment and you're told constantly, like, hey, you're not supposed to like really act on those feelings that you have, that can have an impact. Or if you're told like, hey, these feelings that you have are normal and natural, but here's what you want to do when you have these feelings, those things can have an impact. Because keep in mind, because a lot of times, like when we think of like promiscuous behavior, sometimes it may be looked at as, okay, you must have had an environment where, your moms was just having like different men in and out of the house. But be mindful, there's a lot of like good religious kids that be really buck wild out here. So the environment definitely explains a lot, but the environment, we're interacting with many different things. So the things that we're exposed to with our parents, our siblings, our schools. Again, think about this for yourself in terms of who you are. Like where I have a natural gift to write, and I view myself as a really good writer. A part of my self-identity is being a writer, but I also had to have an environment that was going to cultivate that skill. So you might have been really naturally fast, Shakira, but at some point, somebody else had to tell you, man, you're really fast, Shakira. You should think about running track.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I think you're so fast. You might be able to go to school for this. So keep these things in mind. And this is our self begins to emerge through our social interactions very early on. If you see yourself as funny, a lot of that, like again, you were just being you in first grade, Maisha. But all the kids was like, man, Maisha is fucking hilarious. So after a while, you know how Maisha begins to see herself? It's fucking hilarious. Particularly because it's particularly Maisha. It's one thing if you're at home and they see you as funny, Or if at this school, they see, but everywhere you go, people's like, man, Maisha is a fool. She be having us dying. We got friends like that, right? Maybe that's y'all.
I mean, that is true for me.
Right. Yeah, so like when you say so there's some things, Shakira, that we only show to certain people. There are certain things that's true like all the time. Like so how I be impatient with y'all sometimes, that's not just with y'all, I promise. Like almost every social situation. Like hell, in my personal life, Shakira, I'm way worse. I got no patience for stupid shit in my personal life.
I can believe it.
Right. So keep it. So we want to think about how these, and again, it helps us as we meet other people. They're like, when I deal with students, when I be dealing with again with other people, like, look, my patience ain't the greatest, dog. So I'm gonna tell you this one time, but I need you to be aware of this. Again, this is really important. But keep in mind what I talked about, right? As important as the environment is, Shakira, like the brain still has natural chemical development that it goes through. So sometimes, unfortunately, like if you have a brain injury or some type of like a traumatic injury that impairs your physical development, that could also impact your development of self as well. So again, if you know, an 8-year-old kid, if God forbid anything happens to him and he experiences some developmental challenges, the type of exposure and how he is socialized is going to be impacted by that. Now, when we think about the self, right, we usually think about this only in humans. But one of the things I want you to pay keen attention to, again, why it's so important to read the book ahead of time, is that they're going to give you a lot of different research studies that kind of reinforce some of the things we're going to talk about in lecture. So one of the things, right, in terms of self, and think about this, right, so for as human beings, one of the first things that we do for self, and let me do it here presently, oops, I can't do it. Come on, camera. Should be. I don't see myself. So I was looking for myself, but I can't see myself. I don't know what I'm doing now. But as little bitty babies, one of the first tests that they give and one of the first things they do is like you look at yourself in the mirror and see yourself. It was believed that only human beings could do this. But research was done, Maisha, that suggests that both dolphins, elephants, and of course apes could look in the mirror like, hey, there I go. Like, oh shit. So apes will be in the mirror, she's like, stuff together. Okay, cool. I'm ready to go now. Other animals, they said, aren't able to do that. We think of this as a small naturalistic thing. But again, we use it as one of the first tests for self-recognition. One of the things we're going to talk about again, Maisha, is child development. That as human beings, there's a natural development in all of us that should go through certain stages. So like with autistic children, for example, one of the ways that we're able to know more and discover that they're autistic is that if your children aren't doing certain things by certain ages, that might be something that you want to look into. Do y'all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Again, you all probably will be parents one day. Take your time. So you really want to be mindful about these kind of things. And one of the first things they do, can his child look in the mirror and see and recognize himself or herself? So when we talk about the self-concept, and again, keep in mind this working definition, the self-concept, we get all these individual beliefs about who we are, different attributes. We're Black, we're short, we're impatient, we're generous, we're disciplined, we're good at writing, we're good at math. That this process of developing a self-concept, where we develop all these attributes, Maisha, and we give meaning to them. It allows us to see ourselves as a distinct entity in the world. So again, think about this in our own households. We got siblings, but we very early on, begin to recognize, that even though we're raised in the same environment, Jakira, that my personality is a little bit different than my brother's. The way that my sister processes things is a little bit different than him. So we begin to see ourselves as a distinct entity. It's a really important thing and something that, you know, again, so easy that we take it for granted. Part of this process, and please make sure that you all follow me here. Y'all still there with me, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes, we are.
So a very important aspect of your self-concept, Jakira, this is really important, is imagining what significant others think of us, and we begin to incorporate those perceptions. Again, I stress that word significant others very deliberately. So again, at 2, 3, 4 years old, you begin to not only see yourself as a separate entity, Maisha, you begin to see, how does my mother view me? Does my mother view me as sweet and adorable, or maybe a bit of a grumpy baby? Do my siblings see me as like a good hide and seek player, or not as good? Does my do my parents like it's early? I shouldn't laugh at this, but one of my like I said, I observe people and I try and listen to things. So like I am constantly fascinated at hearing some of my homies talk about their experiences in parenting and being and having children. And a few years back, one of my guys had said to forgive the turn, Latavia. He's like, man, Lincoln is a fucking bitch ass nigga, man. Get on my damn nerves. I always crying and shit. He was like 2. My guy Chico, he talked about how their youngest Bailey, the little bitty baby, he had 3 girls. And Bailey would be like a year old, and but she would be beating the hell out of her older siblings. Like, so she was like, so she had this gangster thug out personality, and she's like a baby and infant. The middle one, Shelby, she's really peaceful and docile. She wouldn't hurt a fly. So Shelby would be smacking the shit out, like, get your ass, give me your cereal. And Shelby is bigger than her and just would be taking it. So early on, right, we get to see how other people see us. Are we tough? Are we vulnerable? Are we somebody that people know not to mess with? And we begin to take these things very early on. And this doesn't mean, again, as we talked about, we're growing and developing throughout our lives. So this doesn't mean that things can't change, but these early years and how other people see us is really important. That's why it's so much attention to getting positive reinforcement at home. If you're the type of child and you're living in a household, Maisha, and you're hearing this from your parent or you're hearing from your teacher as a little bitty kid, you stupid, you ain't gonna never learn nothing. You ain't gonna be shit just like your daddy. That again can have an impact upon how people see themselves. Does anybody recall again? We talked about this last week and the week before a little bit. What was Sigmund Freud, what is his most important contribution to social psychology? What is his most important contribution to social psychology? Does anybody recall?
Are you speaking of the theory that he came up with, or?
His theory was a bit debunked, but there was something that came out of how he did it that we find very useful. So the main thing, so his theory was, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Are you talking about his obedience, like how he tested obedience?
That was Milgram.
Oh, sorry.
No, no worries. It's good. I like that y'all remember the research. It is really easy to mix this stuff up because y'all get so many sources. So no worries at all. But Milgram was obedient. Freud was the dude who came up with the theory, the Oedipus complex and Electra complex. They said that Maisha, when you was a shorty, you went to have sex with your daddy, and that's how you learn how to be a woman, by observing that. That part, most of it, Jakira, we's like, nah, I don't really know about that one, dog. But in the course of him doing that research, there were some things that we did find useful that we still incorporate today that's important to this particular point. That was the concept of the subconscious. So even though we don't think that, people's subconscious is like that people want to have sex with their parents in their subconscious, there are many things that lie beneath our state of consciousness that impact our behavior every day. So you may think about, so you're conscious about the fact that, hey, I want to get to this class on time so that I don't lose points. You're very conscious of that. But there are most of our things like racism and prejudice are often very subconscious, like pathologies. So when I'm talking about the self here, and you may hear something like, hey, as a little kid, hey, you stupid, you ain't never gonna be able to do anything. That lingers in your subconscious and it stays with you. The same holds true, Jakira, if you're hearing a bunch of positive stuff. I was not always a good student, but I got a lot of positive reinforcement